Good morning, members, officers, any members of the public who are viewing the live stream of this meeting. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. My name is Councillor Michael Atkins. I'm the chair of this committee. My vice chair is Councillor Peter Sanford, and I'll introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. If you're in the chamber, you're reminded the meeting is being live streamed. If you're joining us remotely, please ensure your camera and microphone remain off unless you're addressing the committee. If you're present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Item 1 of the agenda today is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies today?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Susan van der Ven and our independent member, Chris Freeman.
Thank you, Aaron. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare in relation to any item of business on this agenda? Thank you, Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. In the Treasury report, it mentions the loan that South Cambridge District Council had made to the Camborne Town Council, and I'm a Camborne Town Councillor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, I'd like to remind the committee that I'm a board member of South Cambridge Investment Partnership, which comes up in several items. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. Just my usual declaration as a non-remunerated Director of Ermine Street Housing, copy-paste from previous minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. And Councillor Williams.
I'm a member of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Assembly, and it's referenced throughout the report.
Thank you. If any other interests become apparent later in the meeting, please raise it at that point. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Do members have any suggested amendments relating to the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of January? No. I'd like to move approval of these minutes as a true and accurate record. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stobart, I didn't see.
Chair, I must abstain because I wasn't present at the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. I'd like to move approval of these minutes as a true and accurate record. Can we do that by affirmation, please? Thank you very much. I'll sign those after the meeting. Item 4 is public questions. We have had no questions received from members of the public today, so we move on to item 5, which is the KPMG final audit report. I'm glad to say we're joined by Jess Townsend from KPMG, who is going to present the report to us. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is just our final report that we had previously taken to the last committee in January. So it's just to confirm that there are no further recommendations or misstatements that we identified in completing our audit of the 24-25 financial statements. They were signed on the 26th of February. The key change in our report this year relates to the fees, and I'm expecting some questions on the fee variations shortly, but it's just to point out that our fee variations for FY25 have been proposed at 75k. These have been approved by the Council, but we're waiting on approval from the PSAA. This is a significant reduction to the fee variations that were raised in the previous financial year. So they were 138k, so that's a 63k reduction. And that's just to point that out and say thank you to the finance team, because that's basically their hard work and kind of help with us and support to be able to get the audit completed for this financial period. But happy to take any questions that maybe should have been previously raised on any items in the report, or as I say, on those fee variations for FY25.
Thank you very much, Ms. Townsend. Can I suggest we have any questions or discussion about fees first, and then I'll open it up to any other parts of this report. I'll go to Councillor Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate this be outside this meeting now, but I think it'd be good to have a breakdown of how that's been calculated and in relation to what areas and a comparison to the 115 from last time. So we can see, is it a case of we've made progress in certain areas? Are we not in others? Because from my point of view, all of this is just dead waste money for the taxpayer. It's important that it gets audited, but the scale fee was increased significantly, and I think rightly so, because what we did see was a sort of recouping of costs through the extras, because the scale fee was incorrect. But the scale fee, I'm going to look to officers, I think was around the 55,000 mark. And it went up to 180. So there's already been a significant increase. So 255,000 while it might have come down a little bit, it's still a lot more than what we should have been paying a few years ago. So could we have a further breakdown sent to committee meetings, just so we can do that like from like? Is it something new that we need to tackle with, or is it an existing problem that's still going? Yes, sorry, I hate to see the audit fees go up, Chair. You know that is a pet thing of mine. I'm sure it is for everybody in the room as well, with the exception, obviously, of the external auditors, who I'm sure are not always so sad to see it, but for the taxpayer's perspective, it's not gaining them anything. So other than some assurance, which, is a year on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any other comments or questions before I return to Ms Townsend to respond? Thank you. So would you be willing, Ms Townsend, perhaps, I think a breakdown would be of benefit to the committee. Perhaps something could be circulated via officers to all members of the committee in the kind of coming weeks, just so we can understand that. But yes, I don't know if there's any further comments you want to make on this matter.
Yeah, so a breakdown's already been shared with the Section 151 officer, so we're happy. We'll just double check that we're able to share that around with the officers as well, and we'll include the comparison to the prior year. I think just to touch on the point, so the scale fee, I don't know where the 55Ks come from. Our scale fee for the prior was 165K, so that's pre-agreed with the PSAA. Okay, so the increase from prior to current year is just inflation, and that's pre-agreed with the PSAA under part of our contracting terms, but very happy, as I say, for those fee variations. We'll confirm if we can share that and get that shared in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on the rest of this report? I do appreciate we've seen this, we have seen this before, but equally it's a very important process that we undertake as a council, so I'd be very happy to have a reasonable discussion around it. I'll take Councillor Leeming and then Councillor Stobart. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask, what precisely, as the auditor, do you recommend that we do in regards to the issues that have been raised with our valuers? Because we are placing reliance on external experts to perform this work, and sitting here, it seems like there's a difference of opinion between your professional view and the valuer's professional view. What is the course of action that you wish us to take, please?
Yep, so we've already started those arrangements. So just to confirm, we had, Fazana, would you like to go first? I've seen you've come off mute.
Thanks, Jess. Just to let committee know, we did have a discussion with KPMG in our kick-off planning meeting. One of the things that I've suggested is that we have a meeting with our valuers whereby KPMG are also involved, rather than sort of third-handly passing the information on. I know this is not just an issue for ourselves. It is an issue with a number of other authorities that are clients of KPMG. And again, I have had these discussions with CFO. So that's the course of action we are taking. Obviously, we do have a contract with our valuers, so I don't want to say too much in a public meeting, but our course of action is to have a discussion with our valuers to highlight the issues that KPMG have raised, and to ensure that KPMG have their valuer present at the meeting as well. So those challenges can be made and both sides can have that discussion. So that's one of the things that we are looking to ensure we do for this cycle.
Yeah, so I was just also going to confirm that our valuation specialists, so internally within KPMG, will be present in that meeting as well. And as I say, we're going to have a specific council discussion, but there are wider discussions going on with the valuation team, because it's not just an issue that has been identified here, it's kind of across the board for a number of councils.
Thank you. Yes, and I think Councillor Leeming's right to raise this. It's a slightly frustrating point, I think, just because we feel a little like we're sort of observing a sort of game of ping pong going backwards and forwards between different groups of experts that can't quite agree. And I think, I think I can speak for the council when I say, we don't need the number to be a particular number. We're not pushing to kind of, we don't need to artificially inflate the value of our assets in order to still be viable. The council's in a perfectly sustainable sort of position. It's not that it's kind of existential for us that a particular number is reached. We just need a number in our accounts that everyone can kind of get behind, and that seems to be the the long and the short of it. But I'm pleased to hear that there's already work going on as part of the planning for next year to try and bridge those differences and come to a common understanding, which is, I think, what we all kind of ultimately want to see. I cut across your question there, Councillor Leeming. Did you have any further follow-up?
Not on this point, and I'll let other people speak, and then we'll come back later, perhaps.
I'll come back to you
Chair.
later. Thank you. Councillor Stobart, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Williams.
Chair, I had a point on exactly the same issue. So it is helpful to see that there are discussions going on, but in the end, this is a process question, isn't it? So there has to be a satisfactory resolution in the form of a process, which we believe has integrity, and the external auditors believe has integrity. So I would hope that what we're doing is going to lead to that process development. So whether it is an external review or an independent review or a point check of valuations, but something that gets embedded in the culture and which both officers and members agree on is the best solution. So I think we shouldn't take our eyes off the fact that there is a process here that we need to, in a sense, develop, check, and then enshrine, and then keep checking. I don't know if that makes sense, but it'd be helpful to get some feedback on that point.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think I'd also be tempted to fold the sort of post-retirement benefit obligations piece into this as well, which is another area where, again, we're just trying to get to a number that, I say just, it's a complex issue, but ultimately we need figures in the accounts that everyone is comfortable with, rather than it being a kind of particular kind of commercial pressures. And again, and I feel like we did, and I think we have raised this as a committee several times, that we are always concerned at the start of an audit cycle that this is addressed as early as possible in the process, because it always feels like it's one of the hardest things to catch up, later on. If it gets round to, November, December, January, and it's not settled, there's a limit to what we can do in terms of working with our partners. Whereas with other issues, if they do fall a bit behind, it feels like there's more scope. If it's something fully within our control, there is kind of more potential to catch up there. So I might come to you, Ms. Ahmed, first, maybe just if you have any comments on the process for perhaps thinking particularly about next year.
Thank you, Chair. And I completely agree. And this is why we're keeping the communication going from the start and ensuring that our external auditors are involved from the beginning, so that we don't get to this stage that we're satisfied from the start of whatever process we decide to sort of go with. And I think that's key, is to keep the communication between all parties to ensure that we get to a resolution that satisfies everybody. Like you said, it's not about inflating the figures, is getting to something that we're all content with, and that there's a justification for it, whichever way we go at the end.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Did you have a further follow-up?
Not on this particular topic, Chair.
Okay,
thank you.
we'll come back round in a minute. Councillor Williams, would you like to make your point, please?
Thank you. It follows on, because I said a lot of this report is the same as what it was before. But one of the things that we asked to have sort of followed up, as it were, after the meeting last time was in relation to the 4-day week and the assurances that were in the report. And it said that no further action, and we asked to see a copy of the letter that was referred to in the external auditor's report. Then we now transpires there wasn't a letter, there was a section of emails, and the emails don't say about no further action. They say they're not currently expecting to provide any feedback beyond the conversation that was had at the meeting. So on reflection of that, I would like to understand why there was such a misunderstanding when it comes to the previous report that we received, which obviously was quite different. Was that just sort of internal communications, or was it something that was provided to our external auditors, or how did that arrive? Because we need to have complete confidence that the information that we are seeing from the external auditors is based on accurate information. And I think that's something where there obviously some sort of communication error did occur, and we just need to make sure that there's ways to make sure that doesn't happen again. Also, and it is very, I suppose for most people it's very minor, but I would perhaps ask if in the external audit reports you could bear in mind of accessibility, because putting a really dark blue background to be able to read then the white on top is very difficult, particularly for people who, like myself, maybe dyslexic. So you can't if I don't use overlays, but some people use overlays. So actually that is a really difficult, and when we're looking at things about accessibility, because it's becoming a council document, could we ask that to be reflected on, please?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Could you just remind me, because I feel like our discussion at the last meeting around the assurances over the 4-day week were in the context of the, were they in the context of the annual governance statement and the work of the internal audit team? That's my immediate recollection, but it may be.
So from what I've looked back on, there was assurances in both. So there was reference also, I can't remember, I think was it the 19th of December? There was a letter referred to, you're right, it was in the annual governance statement as well, but also that was information that the external auditors had been given was what was suggested at the last meeting. So just making sure that the information that our external auditors are getting is accurate, and if there's anything since the emails that were shared, and I appreciate that they were shared.
Thank you for that clarification. Ms. Ahmed, I think you wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, I was just gonna, thank you, Chair. I was just gonna step in and say, reference to a letter, there was no letter. The same email that was shared with members of this committee was exactly the same email shared with our external auditors. So it might just be sort of a terminology used in the minutes or the committee meeting at the time, but there was nothing different shared with either sides. It was exactly the same email, I can confirm.
Thank you, and that's what we're trying to, so, because we had it in the last report, it was on both sides, it was in the external auditor's report as well, and they also said about no further action, but obviously the content of the email says there's no further feedback, that's very, feedback and action are very different things, so has that fully been taken into consideration by the external auditors and our own officers?
I understand that the point that you're making, Councillor Williams. I suppose, I mean, in some sense, the Westminster government can't make a blanket promise that no further action will be taken on any matter at any time, because there's no binding contract that we can make with them that they won't sort of pursue. I'm trying to be as generous as possible here. Pursue whatever policy objectives that they then decide are a particular priority. So I suppose it would be. I suppose it can't be. If we write that no further action has been taken, it means that there's no, there's no imminent prospect of or indication of further action being taken in the kind of foreseeable future. I think that can be the only reasonable interpretation in regards to our relationship with central government. I think that seems reasonably fair to me. The contents email, I suppose, confirm there's going to be no indicate that there will be that neither side is anticipating further communication on this matter for the time being. But do you feel that was put a little more strongly? Do you think that the way it was described?
I feel that in the previous report, by saying that it was almost like matter closed, no more, it was confirmed that no further action would be taken, and then literally a few days later, every council in the country received a letter from government saying that they may take action. So I think that the wording that was used didn't reflect the situation, and it didn't reflect the email chain that we have. I think it was what was reflected of the situation is the government weren't going to provide feedback, and we should be mindful to use the terminology that has been given, because as you say, nobody's got a crystal ball either, so it's something that we should be aware of, and when we're looking at the risks to the organisation and what have you, it's something that we should take into consideration. Now, there are going to be different views as to whether that risk is worth taking or not, and I don't seek to debate that here. We will have that debate, no doubt, every day on the doorsteps over the next few weeks. But I do think, from the purposes of the reports, particularly coming to audit and corporate governance, from a due diligence point of view for myself, we need to make sure that everybody involved in that process is on the same wavelength, I suppose. And it looked, because we had the difference in the two reports, looked last time, which is why we asked for the emails. It's why we asked for the letter, because one person referred to an email, one person referred to a letter. So if now we've had confirmed that the exact same information was given to external audit as was received internally, I feel like we've done our due diligence in making sure that the correct information has been shared, because from the documents last time, there was conflict between what our officers were saying and what the external auditors were saying. But yes, and then if we could have a sort of an acknowledgement of the style and looking at that change, that would be very much appreciated, Chair.
Certainly. I'll come to Ms Townsend in just a second on that. I think, so yeah, perhaps we can just close that point off. I think if perhaps Mr Tully, Ms Ahmed and Ms Townsend, if you're happy that you've understood the nature of Councillor Williams's kind of issue there, and perhaps the sort of particular kind of care needed with language around interpreting the communications that we receive from central government on a day-to-day basis. But I do appreciate that officers were dealing with a very fast moving situation that I think it's fair to say was not directly of their own making, but that is something that we do just need to be careful of in the future. Ms Townsend, sorry, did you want to add any further comments?
Yes, of course. So just starting with that point, so just to confirm, that was not part of our audit findings report, that was part of our annual auditor's report. I appreciate we've not brought a refreshed annual auditor's report to committee, but it is published on the council's website. Just to confirm, we did state that it was an email that was received on the 29th of December, so we did receive the same information, and the wording was actually that there will be no further follow-up from central government. Again, very happy we can kind of clarify that if required. And then we also did know about the letter that was shared to the other councils. Perfect. And then happy to acknowledge the point in terms of the formatting of our report. So that is a national template that we get from kind of our own central team, but I'll definitely feed that back just in terms of getting that kind of a bit more user-friendly and, I should say, better for accessibility purposes.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? I think various members said they might have other issues they wanted to raise at this point. And so I'll come back to Councillor Leeming and then Councillor Stobart. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the other significant comments that were made was in regards to the monitoring of investments. And on page 54 of our agenda and 46 of your report, I would just like to pursue the management response and whether progress has been made in regards to the management response. So that is, management is evaluating the investments which do not currently have formal plans for repayments and intend on taking a report to committee. Management will be seeking further advice from the auditors on best practice guidance in this area. Has that been given, and has that been acted on, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I will just jump in briefly because I have been discussing this with Ms Ahmed. I believe, Ms Ahmed, we're expecting a report at the next meeting of this committee, because I think there was some key external validation or valuations that have not come in until just now, but perhaps you can remind me of the specifics, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's correct. The information that we would have required was post this meeting, which I didn't, wasn't going to, the report wouldn't have got here in time. So we've made the decision for that report to come to the next audit committee, which means that there'll be a full year's worth rather than sort of 3/4 of the year. So that report will come to the next audit and governance meeting. Secondly, we are working on the governance around investments. I've had several meetings with Skip recently myself, and again I have enforced about up-to-date agreements and so forth, so I am pushing from my side, and again we are in communications with KPMG about how we go about this and sort of monitoring thereafter and progress. So it's work in order at the moment.
Thank you. I think we would also appreciate, so at that next committee meeting, if we could also have a view from KPMG on the investment report that comes to us and to what extent this meets the concerns that you've raised, and what kind of remains outstanding, I think would be very beneficial. Councillor Leeming, did you have a follow-up on that?
Just to say that it's reassuring that action is being taken on this, and I look forward to seeing that report in May. I did wonder whether there were any key things that we ought to bear in mind. The sorts of things that we should be looking to see in this area, because I'm keen to see this risk reduced.
Yep, so happy to come in there. So as Fazana already mentioned, we had an initial discussion about what our expectations would be as part of that report. So that was held just before Christmas, I believe, in one of our kind of final meetings for the audit. I haven't yet seen a copy of the report that's being proposed. So as Fazana said, because that's currently in draft, we're just waiting to get their output from it. Once we do, we're going to do our own review and kind of come back on kind of key areas that we think may or may not be missing as part of that. And then very happy as part of that committee, we can kind of add on to the report that's been taken in terms of our expectations and what's been reported on.
Thank you to both Jess and Fazana. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. Councillor Stobart, I think you had another issue you wished to raise.
So I was going to raise that same point, and I think it's been dealt with well. I believe that there must be good practice out there because what we talk about, even with, for example, the investment in SKIP, you know, that is a housing development and there are dynamics associated, but other councils will have done this before us, and I think if there's good practice out there, we should be tapping into it and acknowledging it. And there's probably also tales of woe that would also act as guidance. So, yeah, let's take a very broad view, if we can, of you know, what is good and bad practice and come up with the right solution. So I just wanted to visit briefly the register of interest. That's item 9 in the control deficiencies on page 56 of the agenda pack. And we did discuss this at some length, I recall, and I've read through what is quite extensive commentary, and I'm still not completely clear as to what the solution is from the council's point of view. And maybe we could just have a brief comment about how this is getting resolved and what the, in a sense, the end point is for you know, an officer's register of interest.
Ms. Ahmed, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. So I don't think it's the officer's register of interest that's actually the issue. I think we're quite satisfied that that is working in order. It's more the members' register of interest that seems to be the issue. So this is a system issue, and it's not actually one of mine. Unfortunately, it falls within democratic services, and I have had extensive conversations with democratic services. We had recently discuss this in a meeting with KPMG, and it might be one of those recommendations that you know, management can't do anything about. The issue is that the system is unable to download in sort of one hit all the register of interest. It needs to be done in stages, and I think that's particularly the issue. And I know democratic services have been in contact with our suppliers, and they did have which we thought was a resolution, but unfortunately that resolution didn't transpire as being the fix. It instead broke someone's machine when they tried that interim fix. So we have also spoke about that, you know, whoever the suppliers are providing the system to other authorities, it surely must be an issue for other authorities as well. So it's still one we're still exploring, but I'm not sure we're going to get a resolution on it because it's not internally in our control as such.
Thank you. So just to clarify, by not in our control, you mean it's sort of outside of the immediate finance team?
Yes.
It's part of a kind of
Yes.
broader issue around.
That's correct. It's down to the supplier, so it's down to the system itself, which we obviously don't. You know, it's a system provider that needs to establish a fix or a new sort of patch, and being able to sort of, for us to be able to download a whole list for a particular year rather than having to do the changes over a number of years. We are very aware that the register of interest for council is also available on our website, but obviously that is updated each year if there are changes between councillors. And I think that's more the issue for KPMG. So I think with the officers' register of interest, we're okay with that. We've that one seems to be fine for KPMG.
Sorry, can you just clarify for me what was the issue with the online with the online database of members' interests?
So with the online database, each year we have to make sure that we do a download, a snapshot at that time, because obviously by the time KPMG do their audit come in the summer, that data on our website would have changed, especially when it's a year of elections. So obviously they're doing an audit of the previous financial year. So for example, in the elections, if a member leaves or during the year, that information will no longer be available on the website. So although we do take a download from the website, Democratic Services also does a download from their internal system, and it's not being able to download the register of interest in one sort of go. It stems over a number of financial years, and that's the issue for KPMG, that why does it need to stem over a number of financial years rather than just the year in question?
I see. So in other words, the current system permits you to see a kind of the live situation as to the currently elected members and the interests that they currently have declared. But it doesn't easily allow you to go back to, if I wanted to know the interests of all members who were in post in the 22-23 year, for instance, it doesn't easily allow you to kind of roll back the clock to that point. Is that
That's
the issue?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Yeah, that would seem to be a reasonably significant weakness in the system, because it's not unreasonable that a decision of the council from some, made, say, 2 or 3 years ago might fall under scrutiny, and the interests of the members who were present at the time. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm talking entirely hypothetically. I don't have anything in mind, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that a historic decision may wish that the interests of the members who made that historic decision might wish to be scrutinised. Okay, I think that may be one that we need to pursue further offline, but I think, Councillor Williams, did you want to come in on this particular point?
Yes, just as a reminder, making sure officers are reflective of that for some members, for security reasons, do not have their interests on the public website. There are paper copies held. So, and you keep saying about things being downloaded, I take it that you check the paper copies of those that have their declarations withheld from the public.
Thank you. Let's fold that.
Oh, sorry. I was about to say that's right. We do reference to paper copies as well, and provide them to KPMG as well.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Sobart, this was your question. Let's. Did you have any further follow-up?
Yeah, I'm surprised that we can't track member interests. So even allowing for the fact there are paper copies, this is a kind of a business system question, isn't it? We declare interest, we give dates, and it is revised from time to time, and if we get a new interest, we send it in. So this ability to slice through at certain times doesn't, this is regular IT, I think. So is this something that we should be referring to 3C IT services for a solution? And it exists, it must exist elsewhere. Every local authority will have this question.
Certainly. I'll just come to Councillor Sanford.
I was just going to say that if you ever try to look up the interests of councillors in other councils outside 3C, they seem to have the same software, the same issues. So I think maybe the software doesn't exist. I may be wrong, but definitely worth asking the question. But
yes. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Clark, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide just a slightly more detailed account of what the issue is. So the system is able to go back in time, and so if you needed a record from the 22-23 year, you can go back and do that. The issue is basically that obviously what the auditors want is a full snapshot of all councillors who have been present in the year that they're doing the audit for, and a full register for each of those councillors. Now, what the system does when it provides a report is it only shows the updates that have taken place within that year. Now, obviously, for the auditors, that presents a problem because all they see is the updates and not the rest of the interests that are on the form. So obviously, they want a full list. Now, to do that, the system requires us to go back over the entire elective period. So that would be, say, 2022 to 2026. And there should have been a fix in place that would have allowed the system to pull off a full report of that entire period. But when we tried, it broke. And so what we've had to do is provide basically slices that the system can handle without falling over in small periods. And that does provide a full list of the interest over a period of time. But obviously for the auditors still, that is quite an administrative burden on them to go through all of it and align them up. and provide a full and proper snapshot of what the registers are at this moment in time. So there is an issue still with providing exactly what is required, and that does seem to be an issue with the supplier, not with our own IT systems. So there is basically just further work that we need to go away and do with the supplier. This is an issue that applies to other councils as well, and they are trying to work as quickly as possible to resolve that, but we are making slow progress. So that is what it does. It provides a spreadsheet, but it is the pulling of data off the system onto the spreadsheet. That is where the error is occurring and the system is falling over.
Okay, so I think we'll leave it to our colleagues in Democratic Services to pursue this further with our supplier, but it may well be that between the Democratic Services and Finance team that we also do need a plan B for if this technical fix is not forthcoming, which may well be to pull the data in whatever slices we can and provide consolidated into a vaguely sensible list or database ourselves, and then provide that with the workings to KPMG. I mean, ideally it would come, you know, perhaps with some input from Mr. Tully's team, who I know have experience in this and similar areas. One could even provide one could show the workings in the form of a kind of, you know, sort of Power BI algorithm or some such that should enable the auditors to have, because then the issue is that we haven't pulled it. Once you've messed with it off the system, you then need to gain assurance that we haven't, you know, deleted things that we shouldn't have and that it's still complete. But there may be some combination of pulling what we can off the system and combining it in an audit, and then combining it in such a way that the auditors can gain some assurance that we haven't completely screwed it up. Sorry, completely made a mess of it. Yes, sorry, Councillor Stobart, you wish to correct my lingo.
No, I don't wish to correct anything, Chair. I just wanted to add that could we ask Democratic Services for an update next committee as to progress, or a kind of a project plan, so, you know, something that will set out you know, the various tasks that need to be done. And maybe there isn't an end in sight quite, but it would be useful to see a time plan, if you will.
I think that's a very, very good recommendation. Is everyone reasonably happy with what we've suggested there? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, good. Are there any further comments or questions on this report? Thank you. It's been a very useful discussion. Excellent. So we've been asked to note the report, which we have done so. I'm just going to pause for 1 second. Thank you. I'm just going to slightly reorder our agendas, so apologies everyone. I'm going to take item 9 and potentially 10 at this point, because we have some members who need to leave early. And I'd like a fuller discussion of those items if possible, and then we will come back to 5, 6, 7, 8 and 11 after that, if that's okay. So I'd like to invite Mr. Tully to present item 9, which is the Governance Risk and Control Update. Thank you, Mr. Tully.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all members of the committee. Just to say that I've made a note to have a catch-up with Aaron and see what we can do with our data analytics around the previous item. We'll do our best on that. But with regards to this item on the agenda, we're now jumping to page 83 of our agenda packs. This is our regular update on governance, risk and control. The purpose of this is to keep the committee regularly updated on matters and demonstrate work which helps support the annual governance statements, underpinning sort of my opinion on the internal control environment, governance and risk management arrangements. So just to pull out the key points from this report, if we go to page 87, our internal audit update section, 2 pieces of work have been concluded, which we're reporting to the committee from the last quarter. First of all, value added tax, VAT, we completed a follow-up piece of work. It's important that we go back and check on the progress of actions where there are important actions, and so we'll often do that through a follow-up report. Sometimes we'll do it just by way of checking actions on an individual basis. But we did a sort of a proper audit for this one. That provided reasonable assurance that controls are working well. The important thing, there was a medium action in there, which we highlighted last time, which was completed, which is about reviewing the sort of VAT codes in the back office system. That's been completed, which is positive. There are 2 remaining actions to be implemented. They are in progress. They're probably the lesser priority of the 3 that we highlighted before. So we're probably going to follow those up with just on an action-by-action basis rather than a full report. But we can see they're in progress, and we can see they're likely to be implemented reasonably soon. So we'll just check those off one by one. The second one is grant assurance, UK shared prosperity funds. The council issues a number of different grant schemes from time to time, and we've been able to provide full assurance on that area. Our work is really in 2 sort of tranches there. The first one being making sure, getting assurance that there are reasonable, proactive counter-fraud controls in place. Unfortunately, applying for grants is an area that has got a certain element of fraud risk. So we make sure that's in place. Things like fraud risk assessments are completed, and we were happy that they were. But we also support the team by undertaking proactive data matching analytics to sort of basically check on the data and make sure that that's okay from an anti-fraud point of view. So that's all very good and positive. So we've been able to give that one full assurance. Moving on, the one thing I always like to say, I like to report on the overall assurance of the control environment, and it is reasonable, which is consistent with the previous quarter. That is going to feed into the annual governance statements. The next thing to highlight, if we go to pages 88 to 89, is internal audit standards. So you've probably heard me talk about this a few times at previous meetings, but just to provide you as committee members with confidence, we're continuing to work through the new standards. Our focus was to implement a lot of actions that we identified, get the urgent and important ones done by the end of the financial year. That's just our own target date, and we're on track to achieve that. All the urgent actions have been completed, and we will get on to the important ones by the end of the year. Two bits of progress to note, 2 bits of development, and we've highlighted that there. Developing root cause analysis tools, something that we did on an ad hoc basis, but the new standards require us to really embed that into our work, so we needed to update our processes and systems so that we could make that a consistent part of our day-to-day work. So that's been implemented. And secondly, reviewing our methodologies, which is the technical term, very fancy. It basically means updating our working programs and papers and instructions to reflect the new audit standards. So we did that. We also took the opportunity to modernize them, moving them from old traditional Word-type documents into interactive sort of SharePoint web pages, which has 2 benefits. One, it's easier to find and locate information. And secondly, it's easier for us to stay on top of them and make sure that they're updated. Because when you've got a big, long manual, it can be difficult to keep track of things. So breaking it down to bite-sized chunks is a lot better. There's still guidance being produced from both the Institute of Internal Auditors and CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. So you'll probably note that over the next few quarters, the number of actions we have in place will continue to increase, but there'll probably be low-level actions, just refining and tweaking. We're typically in a good place at the moment. The next thing I would highlight, also on page 89, is apprenticeships. Our team development strategy is to bring a couple of apprenticeships into the scheme, develop talent in-house. We've been sort of dependent waiting upon the apprenticeship scheme to be approved through central government. That's been sort of in the pipeline now for over a year. The good news is literally as of sort of the end of last week, the scheme is now live for level 4 apprenticeship. So we've kick-started already the process for sort of recruiting candidates and working with the training providers. I think realistically, we're likely to be seeing candidates join us by the end of the summer in terms of timescale. But we're keen to try and push on with that as quickly as we can. The next follow-on level is level 6 on that scheme. That's still being progressed, but we expect that to be agreed and finalised by the time the candidates have reached the end of their level 4 sort of apprenticeship training. But the overall summary there is good news because it will help us bring sort of additional sort of talent into the team and develop that and nurture that in-house. On page 90, we have our regular counter-fraud update there from Tara, our fraud manager. On page 91, we've got the annual committee reports. So we've prepared a report, and it's attached as page 95 of your packs as an appendix to this item. We use the same format as in the previous year because that was well received. It's a report of the committee, so whilst mostly a factual document reflecting back on the things we've done over the past sort of municipal year, it's your opportunity to really sort of feed into that report. To those charged with governance, that's the technical term, which basically means reporting to full council, which we would be aiming for for the May meeting. So welcome very much your input and feedback on that, but to kickstart the process, we've included it on this committee agenda. And then on page 92, just our usual update on topical news, just reference to a few bits of guidance which you might hopefully find useful. So those were the key points from the report. Happy to take comments and questions as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Comments, questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. First of all, a comment when it comes in relation to the section on fraud. The amount of preventative initiatives that have gained the stats there, I think, is very good. And our fraud department, always feels like tackling fraud department, I feel I should say. Calling it a fraud department kind of feels like they're doing the fraud. But I think they're doing an incredible job, and it's a very difficult job. I think there is probably work to do on the preventative work is working really well. Actually, just get everybody to be that sort of sceptic and to just think outside. And I think particularly, we have had situations of modern slavery within our district, particularly in close proximity to my ward. These things are happening in our rural. I don't think we quite appreciate always that our rural areas are more vulnerable to these things because they are remote, they're isolated. Hence, we have so many, issues with county lines and marijuana plants and everything else. But on that, what I would say is if also I appreciate you've got a separate report, which unfortunately because I've got to get his funeral, I don't think I'll be here for, on Ripper, but Ripper is referred to in here and it's still 0. And I'd just like to say there are, definitely as a local member, I know there are cases. I have a stretch of road, I'm not going to say where because I don't want to give anybody an idea, fly tipping all the time. Again, it's remote, it's rural, it's not somewhere that lots of people go. We have had success when we used this many years ago, I think it was in Cottenham. The first time, admittedly, they found the cameras, they took them down, that wasn't successful. But the second time, we were better at hiding the cameras. And we did get the evidence that was needed and to tackle that issue in that area. We have these hotspots. We know we have these hotspots. We must start using these powers. We have them for a reason, and another year's gone by with a 0. And that makes me very, very uncomfortable. So I'm afraid I'm sort of voicing my view at this point in the hope that by the time we get to, in case I'm pretty sure I won't be here for the Ripper discussion. But like I say, if we have the powers, we need to use them. And I don't think we've been using them effectively for a very long time now. And my residents, definitely on that stretch of road, would very much appreciate it. In fact, they'd probably offer the electricity themselves.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Williams. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to pick up on there. Mr. Tully, as Councillor Williams said, we will have a fuller discussion of Ripper later on. I would say it looked like there had at least been an application for the use of Ripper powers in the last 12 months. I saw buried in the report, but it was not successful. So, which is more than I think we've seen previously. So that is a direction of travel anyway. But Mr. Tully, I don't know if you wanted to make any further comments on that.
No need to come back with any further comments. Just noted your feedback. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Redrup, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was also on the counter fraud update. I noted that the report this time is a little different to what we had in the last one. So in the previous report, we had information on the number of referrals, the types of fraud investigated, and the number of cases closed. Whereas this time it's more focused on the number of new cases that are open. So I just wondered if there's any particular reason why that level of content's changed. And I guess my concern around this is that we're obviously opening a lot of cases, but in the previous reports, there were only a handful of cases being closed each quarter. So I guess my concern is, are we keeping on top of the cases that we're opening? So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take that and feed that back to our fraud manager. I think the format, you're right, has changed. We are trying to basically review the data that comes out of the system to try and improve the reporting as much as possible, which is a small change in the presentation on this occasion. We've identified a few opportunities to make it even better. Unfortunately, the supplier at this point in time doesn't have that, but they've taken that away to put on their forward plan for improvement as well. So we're going to continue working on that. But in addition to the presentation, I note your comments about the open versus in progress versus closed cases. So I'll feed that back to our fraud team leader.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I wonder if it's also worth considering whether we could have any sort of contextual commenting on the report, because we only ever get data but never any kind of idea on if there is a positive positive movements or negative movements, or kind of what it means in the context of the council, I guess. So if that could be thought about as well, I'd appreciate that.
Definitely, I'll take that way. I appreciate in some cases it might not be appropriate to talk about live cases for fear of prejudicing them, but certainly about how the data moves from one quarter to another. If there's any useful information behind that to lend that context, I'll see if we can get that included.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think we would appreciate seeing the kind of full life cycle of the kind of work. So I think as much as we can get that in would be good. Councillor Stobart, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, on page 89 of the agenda pack, just a kind of comment and a question about root cause analysis. So, I've missed a few meetings recently, and there may well have been more commentary on root cause analysis, but it would be helpful to know a little more, and some of the crosstalk or linkages that might be made. As I understand, a root cause analysis is a set of disciplines and supporting tools that just help you relate cause and effect. And we did have a discussion on employment and staffing recently about measuring, or at least detecting, whether an intervention had worked. And I think sometimes our interventions in stuff, grants and support and extra staff and so on, we do in the hope that it will produce a result, and then we monitor that. But could we be more consistent if we were applying more analytical techniques, if you will, to sometimes complex situations with interacting factors? So yeah, it was just that kind of general question about how is it working out, and has it got broader applicability than might be first seen? Yeah.
Thank you, yes. So in the context of root cause analysis, you're absolutely right. It's about trying to get back to the original root cause to see what the impact was. It's not always obvious on first look, so you delve deeper and deeper and deeper, and the purpose is to, if something's gone wrong, is to try and prevent it happening again, so it saves time in the long run, or if it's something that worked well, it could be a positive, and you might be something you want to repeat, and you want to work out what that sort of original root factor was. So it's something that we've done in internal audit, perhaps on an ad hoc basis over the years. In the context of the new standards, what they're trying to encourage us to do is do it for all sort of significant actions. And there's good reason for that, because it would allow us to sort of pull some data together and maybe spot some trends in the organisation. And no guarantees, but it might help us get some foresight on things which we can deal with quickly, and that might help through aggregation of that data, identify further risks, and we can put controls in place before they sort of materialise. So the way that we're tackling it within the team is by building a back office system to sort of harness and capture that data when we do the root cause analysis work. And if we see any trends, we can then pull that together from that analysis, and we can bring that to, we can bring it to the committee, we can bring it to the leadership team and say, look, these are the things which are going on. It might help to sort of focus resources in this area to prevent this risk crystallising elsewhere. So it's sort of better insight, and then hopefully more foresight that comes from collating that data.
So in an increasingly data-rich environment that we occupy, then these kind of techniques begin to have value. I think you do definitely need data, but you also require that, and you've mentioned it, Jonathan, the need to analyse and relate, so bring that physical or kind of organisational reasoning alongside. So yeah, Chair, it would be great for the committee to hear updates of this in future meetings. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Any further comments or questions on this report? I did just want to flag the the first substantive piece of work you referenced, which I believe was on the VAT treatment, and how VAT is managed within the organisation. So if I've understood correctly, this is following up on some work from a number of years ago, and the assurance is remaining at reasonable, which is a little subpar. If I'm being kind of brutally honest, I think I would be happier seeing things move from reasonable through to full assurance that things have been taken on board. So would you be happy to bring an update back to the committee kind of reasonably soon as to whether those remaining actions have been followed up? Because I think that needs a bit of kind of focused attention. And it's one of those areas where it should be fine, but if it goes wrong, can go wrong quite expensively and cause a lot of issues. So are you happy to bring a kind of keep updating the committee on that, please?
Yeah, happy to do that for sure. I mean, we've got a sort of proper follow-up program in place, a whole mechanism for checking in on those actions. So I'll make a note on that to bring that back to the committee. I mean, for context, the two outstanding actions, as I say, they are in progress. So I hope they will be implemented reasonably soon. They're not showstoppers, but they're things which can definitely help mitigate risks crystallising. So definitely would be a good thing to have in place.
Thank you. Yes, if you could, please. Sorry, Councillor Stobart.
Chair, are you inviting comments on the draft annual report?
Certainly. Let's talk about that now.
I couldn't see it. I haven't dug sufficiently deeply to see whether there is a comment on the training that we've done variously. And I was just trying to remember what the training was, but the self-assessment exercise against the SIP for capability assessment would be one such thing. Yes.
Yes, there was the SIP, but that may have been the year before. I suppose we did that training the year before this one, because time is unfortunately passing in ways that we are losing track of. But yes, I think if we can just check that we're reflecting, we're reflecting the training that we've been undertaking. Yes, Councillor Stobart.
My comment. But if we were thinking, well, the committee ought to be reporting on its training, on just how we're keeping ourselves up to date. Perhaps we should visualise future versions of this report in which there is a training section. And for example, we were just talking about causal analysis, to know a little more about some of the emerging techniques that can be deployed by the council might go on that agenda. So I don't know how this is handled, but it would be great to see in future reports, yes, the committee is updated on this and has that improved capability. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think that would be good, because I think even if I'm not sure if we've had a formal session within the last 12 months, but we've certainly received a lot of updates on a lot of kind of key issues, so it might be good to make reference to that.
Absolutely. We'll double check the dates, and there is a section in there where you can reflect training. I think we do make mention to sort of like as part of these GRC updates, governance risk control updates, we reference different training materials. We'll double check that and make sure it's complete.
Thank you. I did wonder as well, I mean, obviously we'll need to see where we are, but whether in the timetable summarising the current position, this is on page 96 of the agenda pack, because obviously this will go to council in May, so it may be by that point that the draft statements may be complete or maybe kind of near completion or something. I think some indication that kind of progress, that sort of process is kind of in the right place and that they're on track for. And perhaps even a comment that we expect the draft statements to be published, I think in June is the deadline for those. So it might be good just to include, because otherwise looking at that, you don't know. I mean, it could be that we could already be behind at that point, or we could be kind of where we should be. So I think just providing some context to council in May would probably be appreciated as well. Were there any other comments on the annual report of the committee? Obviously, you're welcome to take it away and read it at your leisure, because it won't be published, obviously, for another few months. And I'm sure Mr. Tully would be delighted to receive, or myself, any further comments or suggestions for inclusion between now and then. Thank you. So we've been asked to note the governance risk and control update and approve the draft annual report of the committee. Can I take that by affirmation, please? Agreed. Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item 10, as previously suggested, which is the 6 monthly strategic risk report. I think we're joined by Mr. Ledger online, who is going to present this report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So this is the strategic risk report that comes to Audit Committee every 6 months for review. The report provides an update on the risk monitoring and management activities that have been taking place, particularly since the last review, which was in September at Audit Committee. The latest copy of the strategic risk log is included at Appendix A for review, and there's also a summary of the changes since the last review at Appendix B. And it's worth me saying that as part of our strategic risk review arrangements, any comments or suggested changes or updates that come forward at Audit and Corporate Governance Committee today will be taken forward to our leadership team for consideration as part of the ongoing review and update of the risk log. And that's everything that I wanted to say by way of introduction. So I'll pass back to you now, Chair, for any further comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we're joined by Ms. Ainsworth in the room as well, who may be able to provide further comments or clarifications should the committee request them on particular items. So are there any comments or questions on this item, please, from members of the committee? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of sorry to say this, but I think we might need to add a new risk to the risk register, which is either price volatility of fuel or shortage of fuel due to the ongoing situation in the Middle East. I think there is a significant risk that it could disrupt our operations, most significantly our refuse fleet. Although I've just been looking online, and we do some of our fleet, thanks to our green energy policies, we have a number of electric vehicles and some hydrotreated vegetable oil vehicles, but it's not the full I don't know what the collective noun is for a group of bin lorries, but the full lot of them aren't not oil fueled. I think it's a risk that we need to think about. I hope it doesn't sort of come to this, but I think perhaps it would be wise to prepare. And in addition, I think the potential price volatility or potential fuel shortages could filter through into other aspects of our work, the work that maintenance people do with our housing stock, visits that people go out to meet partners, residents. I just think it's something that, unfortunately, we perhaps need to consider. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd add to that as well. We have a number of villages within the district who rely on oil directly for their heating, and I know there is a government announcement of support coming through. I think it's the Household Support Fund. I lose track of the fund, so I know there is some support coming through from national government, but whether the other resources that we have available to work with families and communities in hardship are kind of aware of a sort of a particular, not cross-district, but kind of localised to particular villages, there's going to be a kind of significant impact there. I don't know if anybody wants to, Ms. Ainsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was also reflecting on this the last couple of days, and I know that we have a risk around international and national events. You'll be pleased to hear that we did have a discussion about this yesterday at our leadership team. The same risks were highlighted in that meeting. At the moment, there isn't an issue of supply, but you're quite right to point out the issue of potential costs. And of course, also, this will all depend on how long the situation continues as well. So we were looking at our resilience programme for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, as well as South Cambridgeshire as well. And we talked about the contingencies that we have in place, particularly for our waste and refuge services. They are quite established contingencies in terms of changes that we can make to rounds and the way that we can look at how we deliver our services. However, we're not at that stage yet. We still feel at the moment that we can absolutely continue with business as usual, but that's what our risk register is for. is to flag these things up and make sure that we've thought about all the mitigations in advance. So yes, we are doing that. We're doing that in a very practical way as of now. And then depending on how things develop, you may see this in the strategic risk register in the future. But just to give some reassurance that on the ground, those mitigations, those contingencies are already being discussed and considered.
Thank you. Like I said, a risk register is the things that you prepare for, not the things that you believe are necessarily going to happen. But to further on from Councillor Atkins' point of view, the point that you raised, sorry, how involved, this is an open question, how involved would district councils be in general support for residents across our district in terms of how they would be affected by price increases, but also shortages? Does our remit extend out into that? My first question was primarily about our responsibilities, things like bin collection, but do we have a wider remit for our communities in this way?
Thank you, Chair. I think what I would say is, as you know, South Cambridge District Council has had great success in working locally with community groups and voluntary groups in our parish councils across the district, not least throughout COVID, where we had to offer and support in terms of that emergency response to some very real life issues. As you know from the risk register, our work continues in terms of cost of living. And again, the council and members are incredibly committed to that work and have continued to see that work through. I think it actually a lot further than some other councils have been able to do or chosen to do. So we do have very strong links, working very closely with our communities and all of those volunteers and, as I say, parish councillors and community groups. I think at the moment, what I would say is the situation needs to continue to be monitored. If we collectively felt that there was something that we needed to look at doing more, then we do have those existing programmes where we would be able to have those conversations with members to see what we felt was appropriate. I think it's a bit too early at this stage to be able to go into it in any more depth, but again, to give that reassurance that because of the way the council has focused on these issues previously, those operations, those relationships are there and in place, and I think at times like this, that shows how valuable that can be.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising that, Councillor Leeming. Councillor Sanford, I'll come to you, and then you, Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. Line item for disruptive growth strategy / proposals for Greater Cambridge. I believe that needs to be updated to accommodate the Development Corporation if that comes about. The disruption is going to be on a significantly higher scale than set out in the narrative here, particularly if we, for example, lose part or all of our planning team. So can I have an update on that in the next version, please?
Through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So if I could start with the cost of living risk, and just referring back to what Councillor Leeming was just mentioning, I think the energy crisis, if you will, I mean, it does touch on operations, but perhaps also on the lives of our residents. And so the heating oil question that we were just reflecting on is one obvious one. So I think as a risk, this is very well kind of placed, and the mitigation action's quite clear, and it does show the importance, the significance of the LIFT initiative there. Now, sorry, I'm leading on to a point about what the risk is called, which is cost of living crisis, and it is elaborated a little further across. So I just wonder if we could give it more life or more relevance just by rephrasing that. So if you just look at the page, so I'm just singling this one out because it seems to be more explicit in the way it's been phrased. So housing assets, MERS contract fails to deliver. There's a risk that MERS don't do what they're supposed to be doing. I'm not saying they are, this is just to illustrate. But what is the cost of living crisis impact? Is it affecting our residents? Is it making some of our residents, pushing them below a kind of some criterion? Could we make this, and the risk that follows SR18 organisational culture, organisational culture goes wrong, or fault lines develop, or something. What I'm appealing for here is a better way of describing the risk, so that when we do talk about it, it's clearer what's going on. That was just an observation on how we name our risks. Could I mention something else? We have talked about retiring risks and what is the dynamic around how we accumulate risks, manage them, and then retire them when we believe they're no longer needing that particular attention. We have added one, but we haven't retired any. Not that that is a particularly significant thing in itself. We would expect risks to arrive. But how are we managing this process of should we take a risk out? What's the criterion for taking a risk out? Because we now have it covered and we've dealt with the root cause. We don't have to pay particular attention. So perhaps we could pick those two up.
Yes. Mr. Ledger, do you want to start with that?
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back initially to answer the question about the naming of risks, and that's absolutely something that we can pick up and look to undertake a review on prior to the next Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. I'm more than happy to take away that action to do that. And I think it's actually quite good timing to be doing that at the start of the new financial year. And also, I think it's fair to say that up until now, we've kind of been focused on getting a certain level of consistency with our a certain level of, I want to say embeddedness, but that is not a word. Making sure that our processes are correctly embedded in relation to strategic risk. And now I think is a good time to be looking at and reflecting on what we've got on there and where we could improve certain aspects, including how we are describing the different aspects of the risks that we have on our corporate and strategic risk register. So absolutely happy to take that away. On retiring risks, you're right in saying that there were none retired on this occasion since September. However, I would say that there were 2 or 3 that were retired that we reported on in September, and that's something that is regularly looked at and considered by leadership team. And then where there are any that are retired, those are obviously brought forward here and flagged up as part of the Appendix B. I believe that the ones that were off the top of my head were retired last time were primarily around things that were no longer a risk or where the risk had expired, such as due to having a limited time frame, essentially, such as risk around the contract for waste, which was resolved last summer, I believe I think the time frame was. So yeah, there are always going to be things like that we really need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on to see how they are progressing and where they are resolved, to make sure that we are taking those things off of the risk log so that it doesn't become too unwieldy. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I comment? Yeah, through you, Chair. Thank you. That's a very helpful update. So could I just, and this is more a comment on our risk appetite as an organisation, because I think we've referred to it from time to time, but perhaps not formalised risk appetite. And even if we haven't formalised it, it's implicit in the list of strategic risks. So how we characterise risk and how we react. So I wonder if, and this is a comment, and I just, if I mention it, I'm not looking for any particular action, just perhaps for some thinking around it. Should we be reflecting on, what is South Cam's appetite for risk, to, in a sense, capture what might be implicit as an explicit position? So just a thought. Yeah.
No, it's a good point, and I think sometimes some narrative around risk appetite can be helpful for an organisation in terms of thinking about its priorities and how it wants to address them. So I think that would be worth some reflection. Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions from members of the committee on this? Thank you. So apologies. We have been asked to review the current strategic risk register and make comments and suggestions as appropriate, and I believe we have done so. So thank you, and thank you, Mr. Ledger, for joining us, and Ms. Ainsworth for your comments as well. We'll return now to the correct running of things. So we'll pick back up at item 6, which is the Treasury Management Performance Report for the quarter ending 31st of December 2025. Before we do that, is anyone in need of a break at this point? We have been going for about an hour and 20 minutes, so I'm happy to adjourn for a few minutes, so that would be appreciated, or we can plough on in the hope of lunch. Plough on in the hope of lunch, right. No pressure, Mr. Lee. You've been asked to, if you would be so kind as to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the latest quarterly update on the Treasury Management Treasury activity. So that's the activity from April up to the end of December, up to the end of quarter 3. And I'll give us a brief overview of the activity. So if we start with our investments, yes, generally the council's more cash rich in the first 9 months of the year in terms of sort of collecting the council tax and business rates over those first, actually 10 months of the year, and also in receipt of grant monies earlier on in the year. So we're more cash rich over those first 3 quarters. And we've actually found that lending to other local authorities rather than banks and building societies, which is what we would traditionally do, we've actually achieved sort of better, more favourable rates of return, and at the same time actually does actually reduce the risk profile of our investment portfolio as well. So as at the end of December, sort of most of our sort of short-term investments were all placed with local authorities, and I think almost the vast majority of those will now be maturing over this final quarter, as we need, because of our cash flow, we'll need to use those funds. In terms of our borrowing activity, whereas we'd been quiet in the first 2 quarters, we did actually start to borrow in quarter 3, and this was primarily for our HRA, for our new build housing developments. We've got a number of schemes now across the district. We will always generally borrow from government, from the PWLB, because as a HRA we benefit from a discounted rate if we're borrowing for the provision of new housing. But just to note that we did actually do some very short-term borrowing at the end of December from local authorities. This was because we were in negotiation with a developer at one of our larger sites at Marley, just on the outskirts of Cambridge. And we knew that once we were in contract, we were going to have to make a large down payment, a large deposit payment. But it was uncertain at the time whether that was going to be done before or after the new year. We didn't really want to borrow ahead of need if it wasn't necessary. And borrowing from the PWB, we have to work with a 1 week advance notice. So knowing at the time we could access relatively cheap money by borrowing from local authorities, in the event we did that, we borrowed just for a sort of 3 to 4 week period, and we refinanced that borrowing in January by borrowing from the PWLB and achieving a lower rate with the discount we receive. In terms of our performance against budget, as has sort of been explanations for the previous committee meetings. We've been achieving sort of investment returns that are higher than what we've budgeted, primarily because we've had some slightly higher cash balances than forecast, and we're achieving these higher rates by lending to local authorities. And our borrowing costs are actually lower than what we'd budgeted because we've managed to delay the borrowing. I said we delay the borrowing. Some of that is because the new build schemes have had some slippage, so we haven't needed to borrow until later in the year. So that's also had the impact of reducing our borrowing costs when we compare that to the original budget. So that's going to give us a favourable variance come the end of the year. Just to say, in the current, things have changed, as we've sort of been alluded to in other comments in this meeting. So at the start of January, we were all expecting the Bank of England to make further cuts to the base rate. They're actually due to make an announcement at noon today, and in January, most people were expecting there to be another base rate cut of 0.25%. Because of the events in the Middle East, we're now expecting them to hold rates. So we have seen borrowing rates increase, such that they're now comparable to where they were a year ago. But yeah, as we've discussed already, depending on how long the conflict continues, it may mean that interest rates will be increasing because of the impact on energy costs, and then in turn inflation, and then in turn on the Bank of England and their sort of remit to try and keep a control on inflation rates. So yeah, it's just something we're mindful of at the moment, given a close monitoring of the interest rates in terms of borrowing, though we will of course benefit from higher rates in terms of our investments. So thank you. That's a sort of update on the sort of the key activity for the quarter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee, and thank you for the report. I was particularly pleased to see, so on page 72, paragraph 32, I think this table is really starting to take shape now. I think we've got the information in there that we've been asking for, and the reference to SCP as well as SCIP as well is appreciated. So thank you for taking on board our feedback previously on that. Are there any comments or questions on this report that members would like to raise? Oh, Councillor Stobart.
Sorry, if I could briefly, through you, Chair, for investing in other local authorities, so it's like a bond issue, is that right? So we would propose an investment with said local authority. How does it work, and how do you kind of create that portfolio? Just you know, a thumbnail sketch would be interesting.
So just as in the same way that we needed to borrow money in December, we go through brokers, okay. And so we told them we had a need to borrow for a certain period. And they will contact other local authorities who had surplus cash and were willing to lend to us. And it's the same in terms of us. We'll be approached by brokers when they have got local authorities who need to have cash, and if they know we've got surplus cash, you know, quite often it'll be the other local authority dictating what they need. They might need to borrow money for a 9-month or a 6-month period, depending on their cash flow needs. But it is then just arranged as a sort of a sort of fixed term lending agreement.
And how, through you, Chair, sorry, how are the interest rates decided?
Basically on need. So we know the rate we can achieve by placing our money in a money market fund. If a local authority, depending on the need and the urgency, they'll be willing to pay a higher rate. And we would always compare the rate offered as to what else we could achieve with our money elsewhere. So we'd always be looking to beat the rate we can achieve by placing money in our own money market funds.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
No, thank you. That's it is interesting. This probably sort of a surprising amount of activity going on kind of across the whole nation in terms of, you know, every council just smoothing out its cash flow. Must be quite a kind of, quite a large market, really. Are there any other comments or questions on this report? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. Just to continue on Councillor Stobart's point, some local authorities are more risky than others. How is that assessed, and is that something that the broker helps us with, or is that a judgment that we make ourselves?
There are certain authorities where, in order before we would lend, we would need our Section 151 officers' approval. So I've forgotten the correct section number where if a local authority is under special measures, we wouldn't be able to automatically lend to them without prior approval. But if a local authority is sound and submitted their accounts on time, etc., then we are able, according to our treasury strategy, lend to them in line with all the other rules within the treasury strategy in terms of length of lending.
My second question is to do with the short-term borrowing in December. When will that be repaid? And it's short-term borrowing. Is that for a year or is it for a few months? What's the duration of that? And what will we use to repay it? That's what my question is. Thank you.
Yes, so we borrowed literally only for, I think there's two loans, one for 3 weeks, one for 4 weeks. So they matured we had to repay them in January. But it was at that time we then borrowed from the PWLB. So we borrowed, repaid that short-term borrowing, and we now hold long-term borrowing with the PWLB.
Thank you. So that's the long-term borrowing that's in the HRA account, through the HRA account. Thank you. That makes sense.
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed, you wanted to comment on one of those issues?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was in regards to Councillor Lehman's first point. We also receive a list from our Treasury advisors about authorities we can lend to or borrow from, and that list also includes those that obviously where the risk appetite is high. Just so that I just wanted to let Councillor Lehman know that we are provided with regular information from our Treasury advisors as well.
Thank you, Fazana.
Thank you. So we have been asked to review the Treasury Management activity and performance for the quarterly period to the 31st of December, and we have done so. Thank you. I'm going to move on to, we've got agenda items 7 and 8, and then 11 left on our agenda today. So we'll move to agenda item 7, which is the proposed accounting policies. These were provided in a supplement as they hadn't been received by the original date. There are some hard copies floating around if anybody would particularly like one. Could I please ask Ms. Ahmed to present this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, this is the accounting policies that are included in the statement of accounts. It's good practice for Audit Committee to receive these in advance of the draft accounts to be sort of worked on over the coming months. I'm not sure if this Audit Committee was receiving them before. You were obviously receiving them as part of the draft statement of accounts and approving those as part of that, but as now we're sort of getting into that practice of working on year end time and publishing the draft statement of accounts in line with sort of the government's deadline, I thought it would be good to circulate this in advance. So basically the accounting policies are sort of underpin our sort of treatment of what is included in the statement. Broadly, those, we use the SIPFA code of guidance, and broadly, the accounting policies haven't changed that much, so there haven't been significant changes, par one that I mentioned in the main report. which can be found on page under paragraph 9, and that's to do with property, plant and equipment. So we're now being, asked to ensure that we include a revaluation index every year. And a full valuation is taken every 5 years. So that's now asking all authorities to do a full valuation every 5 years. So that's sort of on all PPE. And then in between those 5 years is to apply an indexation so that PPE is sort of in line with up to date rather than waiting for the revaluation. There might be some other small changes between now and the draft accounts being published at the end of June, and those will be included in the final draft statement of accounts. But that's all I had to highlight at this stage.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ahmed. Are there any comments or questions on the draft accounting policies that have been presented? Thank you. So we've been asked to review and approve the draft. We are also being asked to grant delegated authority to Ms. Ahmed, the Chief Finance Officer, to make any necessary amendments prior to publication of the draft statement of accounts in 25-26. I wouldn't normally grant a kind of sweeping delegated authority to sort of make any amendments without reference, but in any case, they will be seen again by the committee in June when the draft accounts are published. So if there are any changes, they can be highlighted at that point, and there's still plenty of time to change them before the final version. So on that basis, I'm personally happy to grant that authority to Ms. Ahmed between now and June to make any further updates required. But if any member of the committee feels that's too much, then please wave and shout. Otherwise, so can I ask that we approve these policies and grant the necessary delegated authority to the Chief Finance Officer to make any necessary amendments prior to the draft statement of accounts. We'll do that by affirmation, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. We move on to item 8, which is the policy and update on the RIPA powers. I believe we are joined by Ms. Catafou to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members. So, as you can see, I think the recommendations here are to approve the RIPA appendix. This has just been updated slightly because there's been a change in personnel. So where it used to be John Murphy, it is now myself. So that's the main change in the actual policy. And in terms of the actual RIPA powers, I understand you've had some training last summer on it, so you have a basic understanding of it. So that hopefully has been quite helpful and useful to members going forward. The last meeting, the last yearly meeting, there were some observations made by members, and I've obviously tried to get some updates for you in terms of those. In terms of the question about knowing what we use it for and what we don't use it for, obviously we can't give you all the information, so I've sort of given a brief highlight of one of the applications that came through that didn't actually meet the threshold. It is a very high threshold and a high bar. And I understand, obviously, Councillor Williams has left now, but she'd obviously made the question about us using the powers. I think it's quite helpful to let officers and members know that it is a very high bar to use it, because we do need to have proper evidence as to why we can't use any of our other powers to go for covert surveillance, because it is an infringement on human rights. Regarding the example that Councillor Williams has set, I have just checked with Mr. Isan in terms of whether he's aware of this particular area while we were waiting, so I could at least give you a bit more update on that. He is unaware of this particular strip of land, but if it is private land, that makes it even more difficult. We cannot sort of provide or do covert surveillance on private land without special authority from the magistrate's court, and we would have to obviously evidence the harm and why we can't use or speak to the landowner, if he is a private owner, as to how he's allowing this land to be used for fly tipping. We will look into it, and I understand that I will reach out to Councillor Williams after this meeting just to check if it's something that we can help, if it is public land, then that might be a bit easier for us to have a strategy in place. But there are other powers that we could use rather than RIPA for such things. Any questions, please?
Thank you very much, and thank you for addressing Councillor Williams's comments. I'm sure we can make sure that she can get a little summary of what's just been said, so that she can feed that back. So yes, any immediate comments or questions on that? I wanted to raise. Sorry, I'll come to you in a second. Sorry, Councillor. I just wanted to raise in terms of there was mention that updated training for members could be provided in the next municipal year. I wonder if rather than a training session focused specifically on RIPA powers, whether something a little broader might be of more benefit to members, maybe involving a number of different service directorates. And I'm thinking particularly around this issue of envirocrime and fly tipping in particular, I think is becoming, I'm aware of several issues, several cases in my own ward, again, where I think it was indeed on private land. And I think, so I don't know if there's a sort of slightly more holistic thing we can put together around envirocrime and fly tipping in particular, which would bring in some elements of perhaps RIPA powers and how and when they can be used, but in their context of first we need to try steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this is what steps 1 through 5 are before we get to that. Could I perhaps leave that with you to take away in discussion with other officers?
Absolutely. So my understanding is you're looking at not just RIPA, but enforcement powers that we as the council will take in terms of particular envirocrime. Yes, we can get that.
I think, well, and perhaps also the kind of, I know we have an envirocrime team, and there'll be preventative elements as well as the more kind of prosecutorial elements, as it were, of what we're able to do. So I think that might be of more interest, and as well, just thinking in terms of councillors and their limited time. I think if we advertise a training session that's really focused on a kind of the live issue that comes up rather than the technical application of a particular policy, I think we may have more success in generating that understanding that we would like. Sorry, Councillor. Well, I asked for comments and then immediately jumped in, which is very rude of me. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. Well, I'm just going to kind of pick up the point you've just raised, Chair. It would seem, so here's a thought that the RIPA powers are at one extreme. So when things get really tough and difficult and we have to gather some data, then the RIPA powers might work. But actually there's a continuum, isn't there, from just general awareness of what's going on, and that might be coming through kind of parish councils, and we pick it up and members talk to residents, and then all the way through, increasing the acute data analysis to finally RIPA. So there's this kind of continuum, isn't there? And understanding that continuum and how we can help it work. I think somewhere in there's causal analysis, isn't there? We can start, looking at cause and effect. And I guess there are sources of data. Now, I'm only speculating here, but that particular situation that Councillor Williams highlighted might be supported by, for example, changes of traffic movement, of associated events which lead to fly tipping. So is there construction work going on? Is there other stuff going on in the vicinity that could actually lead to fly tipping? What's the pattern of contractors and so on? So I think, just to reinforce your point, Chair, it would be helpful to see this continuum rather than RIPA being out there as a little isolated thing. It is part of a process.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Any further comments or questions on the update and the reviewed policy? Thank you. So we are being asked to approve the Council's RIPA policy and note that the Council has not used surveillance powers in the year to date. Can we do that by affirmation, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. So the final item on our agenda today is matters of topical interest. Do any members or officers have any matters they wish to raise? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. And as noted, the next meeting of this committee will be in July after the May elections. So the makeup of the committee will probably be very different to what it is now. I believe Councillor Atkins, you're actually standing down as a councillor. So we will have a new chair for the next meeting. And can I just thank you very much for your calm and professional chairing of this committee over the last 4 years, and wish you the best of luck in your future endeavours.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. Councillor Sandford, I have been very ably assisted by yourself. No stranger to chairing difficult meetings in your own capacity. Yes, I mean, for my part, I'd just like to thank all members of the committee. I think it's been a really productive, there's been excellent discussion, a real sort of interrogation of what's been put before us. And I think I hope we have aided officers and auditors with our thoughts and our comments, and in our ability to influence the kind of wider organisation. And that's something that we've all contributed to. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And equally, I'd like to place on record my thanks to all the officers who have supported very ably the work of this committee. I'm going to miss some people out, so apologies, because I always forget people, but I would highlight particular, of course, Fazana Ahmed, Ms. Ahmed, Mr. Lee, and the rest of your team have obviously been critical to our work. And I know there have been a lot of changes in your team in the last 4 years or so, and we've really appreciated where the team has got to, your engagement with us and your openness with us. So thank you very much indeed. We've been very ably supported by Mr. Tully throughout my time as chair, with commendable consistency, reliability, always willing to take on new work and look at new things, and really help enable the work of this committee. So we're very grateful for that. Ms. Katavu and your predecessors, obviously as monitoring officer, have been valuable, and we have frequently relied on their advice. Mr. Clark and the rest of the Democratic Services team, without whom none of this would indeed work. And of course, not forgetting our external auditors. Thank you, Ms. Townsend. I would just say that particularly the last few years, the engagement from the external auditors has been a real step change. I think I can speak for all of us on behalf of that. We've really appreciated your presence and engagement with the committee. We've had good answers to our questions. And I think we're confident that we're leaving things in a somewhat better state, perhaps, than we found it 4 years ago. And that's in large part thanks to your work as well. If I've forgotten anyone, sorry, but I think that's pretty much everyone in the chamber. So everyone else will just have to lump it. So thank you all very much. If there are no other matters to raise, I will end the meeting there at 11:45. The next meeting is due to be on Thursday, the 9th of July. Thank you very much, everyone.